Hello, my name is Laurence Hoffstadt, and my aim today is to highlight the recommendations that ECHA promotes for you to bring your REACH data up to speed and then to keep it up to date. So my main focus will be to summarize your obligations, to point to items to pay attention to which can support you, and to remind you of the means ECHA has given you to check activities around the substances you have registered. Of all your obligations, you are principally responsible for registering a complete and compliant dossier as of the date of first registration. And then to keep your dossier up to date going through the life cycle. So your dossier needs to be complete and compliant in terms of quality and requirements according to your tonnage bands. You also need to identify fully your substance in terms of composition and boundary composition for the members of your joint submission, and the identity in terms of its constituents and their concentrations. You also need to identify the uses in the supply chain and during the life cycle of the substance. Finally, when you register first time, if you identify data gaps, you also must propose testing to fulfill your requirements, and ECHA will check these proposals for further testing. And you also have an obligation to review existing registrations. So when situations change, you have the obligation to update without undue delay your dossier. And the European Commission has clarified what this means and generally has given a deadline of 3 months after the change for you to update the dossier. For example, if substance identity changes or if the lead legal entity changes status, for example, or the tonnage band. And a longer timeline and longer deadlines are provided and agreed for more complex changes, such as updating the CSR. And remember, even if you cease manufacture or import of your substance, some of these obligations do not go away. You still have the obligation to provide information if you have received a decision which has been finalized, so adopted by the agency. Then, if your substance is registered at more than 10 tons per annum and also is classified as dangerous or as having persistent bioaccumulative or toxic properties, or very persistent and very bioaccumulative, you must perform an exposure and a risk assessment. And thereby you need to report all hazards and outcome in the chemical safety report and safety data sheets, and not just the hazards that are classified. You must report all uses and conditions of use, describing them clearly with names, for example, easy to understand. And you need to cover the uses within the supply chain and the life cycle of the substance. You must also identify how you control the risks during the use of the substance. For example, how you minimize the release in the environment in case the substance is PBT. So make sure you use exposure scenarios that are transparent, specific, and exhaustive. And you can benefit from using use maps. I will mention that in a minute. Another obligation is to keep your classification and labeling information up to date. Remember that it's an obligation for you to update in case, for example, a new harmonized classifications is being agreed or voted at the RAC committee. So the classification and labeling in general is independent from the tonnage bands you have registered, and because it characterizes your substance. And you need to use the most severe test results when applying the criteria defined in the CLP regulation. And finally, yes, you mmust report all harmonized classification. Also, more specifically, in the process of evaluation, you need to react promptly when you receive a draft decision, which means that you should get organized with the members of your joint submission to be able to provide comments per the timeline defined in the legislation in order to exert your rights to be heard during the decision making. When the decision has been finalized and the deadline has been set, you should agree with the members or the addressees of these decisions who will do the requested test on everyone's behalf. And there you must inform ECHA within 90 days of receiving the final decision. When the deadline has passed, you must report studies in format of robust study summaries in your Euclid dossier. And remember that this data needs to be adequate for classification and labeling and for risk assessment. And also, in any case, even if the studies are delayed and you cannot update your dossier providing all this information by the deadline set, you still, in any case, should update your dossier and provide reasons in your updates, because ECHA will check when the deadline has passed, and if no data is being provided, will inform your national enforcement authorities. So to fulfill your obligations, I want to point to you again the tools that are at your disposal. So first, you can use the authorities coordination tool, which can help you being aware and monitoring the regulatory activities that are happening around your substance. And then, of course, to keep up to date. And from these two, you also have links that send you to more specific information. Then, of course, REACH-IT is your tool to manage your registration. You can receive notifications of new messages or of new tasks directly in your inbox, email inbox, if you have set it from within REACH-IT. Within your company, you should also agree on who should log in and monitor the REACH-IT inbox. And this person can therefore ensure that their contact details is up to date and have also set up proper backups where needed. Also in REACH-IT recently, we are providing now a dossier evaluation status page, which allows you to follow evaluation activities for your joint submission. So whether you are an addressee of a decision or not, you can still follow activities that are occurring in your joint submission and which may in turn have an impact in your future decision or the future cost of your dossier. And of course, outside of REACH-IT, you can use the communication to the members, other means of communication to the members of the joint submission within the supply chain or with industry trade associations, for example. And finally, also, when you update your dossier, we really strongly recommend that you use the iEuclid validation assistant, because it will provide you a report identifying if you have entered the required information in the proper fields and proper sections in your dossier. And that allows you to modify it before submitting it, because then it goes through a technical completeness check and will be maybe rejected. There are also additional resources which can support you. There is the more recently we have put on our website the EU Chemicals Legislation Finder, which is an easy online tool to help you search information from about 40 different pieces of legislations and help you to understand how your substance is regulated through the EU, across the EU. So it goes from pesticides to water standards to emissions, cosmetics, and so on. And there you can either search by EC number, so directly your substance, or within each piece of legislation. I mentioned also the use maps that industry sectors have put in place and which provide brief descriptions of the main use applicable to your substance and can be used easily. It is available within the KSAR tool and can be used directly into your chemical safety assessment. And also, if your dossier is evaluated by ECHA or the substance evaluated by member states, you can follow the status and the progress of these processes in following one of these links. And you will have in a timely manner the progress through the process. You can search this list by, for example, EC number or substance name. And from there, you are also sent to more specific information or documents. So for your dossier to be up to date, you must provide information which depends both on the property of your substance and on the tonnage you have registered. Deviations from standard information requirements are possible only if they are thoroughly and appropriately justified according to the rules set in REACH. And I also, of course, want to remind you that testing on vertebrate animals can only be performed as a last resort, and in some cases, you need to justify that you have considered other means before deciding to go for animal testing. And this is to ensure not duplication of animal tests. The results, so this information must be adequate for classification and labeling according to the CLP regulation, and need to help you take further regulatory action depending on the results, and also to consider the impact on other legislation if, for example, your substance would be carcinogenic, mutagenic, reproductive toxicant, or have properties in the environment or as endocrine disruptor. So this presentation was a summary of the recommendations that we have been reminding and promoting over the years, and that is now available on this webpage. If you click one of these boxes, you will then find more information, more details, and also links to further pages or the tables I was just mentioning. And if you need to remember something from what I presented to you today, and that would be that your dossier is your business card, and your registration, like your market volume, is dynamic, and therefore updates are expected and are always necessary over time. Also, a couple of years ago, ECHA started screening all substances and all dossiers to see which further regulatory actions would be needed. So your dossier will be also under scrutiny. But you have the means to check, and you have the means to follow activities that we undertake. And I've described a few of them, so please use them. And here I've provided a few more links to support you before you register or when you want to update your dossier, and also a few more specifics in case you receive decisions from on evaluation of your dossier or substance. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.